Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse, proudly kicking off season 4 of the Qasim Rashid Show. I mentioned last week that we were extended in part, not in part, in complete part, due to your support and you listening to the show. So deeply grateful to you. And, one thing that hasn't happened in a while is I'm not getting emails from you guys about guests you want to see on the show. I get a lot of emails about, hey, I appreciated this or I disagreed with that, and I love them all. But if there's folks you want to see on the show, send me an email and just send it to my personal email, qasimrashid@gmail.com, or send me a DM and let's get these folks on the show, because I want this show to be reflective of people that you care about. You already know the topics and the subject matter I talk about, the human rights issues, and let's bring on the folks to elevate those. So don't be shy about that. So thank you all for listening to the show and keep the conversation going. We've got a great show lined up. Gina Ortiz-Jones is here. The Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones served as the 27th Undersecretary of the Air Force, second highest civilian in the Department of the Air Force. She was appointed by President Biden and unanimously confirmed by the Senate. She has run for Congress. She is now the executive director of Find Out PAC, a PAC in Texas working to oust the judges that passed the barbaric and ass-backwards abortion ban. You remember the story of Kate Cox, the woman who needed a life-saving abortion and was forced to go out of state to receive one. This woman, Gina Ortiz-Jones, is working to oust those absurd judges. And so she'll be on here in a little bit. You definitely don't want to miss that. And I definitely encourage you to support her work, because this is the kind of work we need to support to save our democracy. I'm going to start by sharing a few thoughts on what is now the 23-year anniversary of 9/11. And, it's 23 years. Wow, first of all. I mean, second of all, I remember I was a 19-year-old college sophomore when 9/11 happened. And I think I think I am among the last generations of people who was an adult prior to 9/11 and kind of entered adulthood the year before. And I think I had just turned 19. Yeah, my birthday is in July, so I just turned 19. And so I can remember life distinctly before and after. I traveled internationally before, and I travel a lot internationally now. And I see kind of the world that we're in. And I wanted to just make 3 really important points today, because I think these are things that legacy media doesn't really talk about. And they kind of ignore, they go through the motions now of, remembering the 2,977 Americans who died. And that's important because these were innocent people. They're our neighbors. They were viciously ripped away from us by terrorists, by extremists. And so my prayers are to them and to their family, to the departed, and we cherish their memories. What I would say is, let's keep the conversation going. Don't stop it there, because there's so much more that we need to be accountable for. In the 23 years since, we've lost nearly 10,000 American soldiers in what I would argue were failed and illegal wars. Wars that, depending on the estimates, hundreds of thousands of Afghan and Iraqi civilians were killed in those 2 wars. Our government spent $8 trillion on the so-called war on terror, which, if you do the math, comes out to about $250 to $300 million a day for more than 2 decades. They spent $10 million an hour for more than 2 decades on war. And we are no safer or closer to peace or justice today than we were back then. None. I think about Representative Barbara Lee, who cast the sole vote against the Afghan war. She was the only person, a Black woman from California was the only person who said, hold up, this doesn't pass the moral test. I'm going to vote no. We should not authorize this war. This is not how we're going to bring about peace. In the days and weeks after 9/11, she stood alone with the moral courage to oppose that war. And she was right. History has tragically proven her right more than I believe even she might have imagined. And after 23 long and painful years, my prayer is that our future policies are not built on invasion and war, but on justice and diplomacy. on accountability and transparency, on our constitutional promise of due process of law, of human rights. So as we mourn the 2,977 American civilians who were killed on that day, let's not forget the soldiers who lost their lives and the hundreds of thousands of innocent Afghan and Iraqi civilians who lost their lives because George Bush wanted to wage a crusade. Those are his words. And so that's the second thing, the perspective in history that I want to reflect on. I'm seeing these memes pop out over the last couple of years, whitewashing post 9/11 America. And the meme starts with a big headline that says, I miss 9/12, right? 9/12, the day after 9/11. And the text says, I would never, ever want another 9/11, but I miss the America of 9/12. Stores ran out of flags to sell because they were being flown everywhere. People who were upset at Americans before were now united. Jewish and Christian, Republican, Democrat were united. We hugged people without caring if they ate at Chick-fil-A or wore Nikes. On 9/12, this is what the meme says, what mattered more was what united us than what divided us. And guys, if you see this meme, please don't repost it, because this is not reality. This is whitewashing. This is a complete obviation of reality. If even after 23 years, you think the weeks or months after 9/11 were days of unity, you have not been paying attention to the Black and brown people in your life, to the Muslim Americans in your life. The people in your life who feared for our safety and suffered a massive spike in hate crimes for something that we had nothing to do with. The first American killed after 9/11 in a hate crime was a Sikh American. Wasn't even Muslim, but a white supremacist killed him, shot him in the face. And this man was, Bober Singh, this man was a saint in his community, beloved by all. And he was killed, shot dead in his face. This quote unquote unity, this myth of unity, means that you ignore the massive spike in anti-Muslim, anti-Hindu, anti-Sikh, anti-Arab hate crimes after 9/11. It means ignoring the Patriot Act, which even some Democrats continue to recklessly vote for, a complete violation of our privacy. It means ignoring that the New York Police Department illegally and warrantlessly spied on American citizens who were Muslim for 6 years. And by the way, all without a single lead. This myth of unity means ignoring the dozens of states who tried to pass anti-Sharia legislation, or ignoring the torture at Guantanamo Bay, or CIA torture, or indiscriminate drone strikes, or the Muslim ban, or birtherism, all of which was the result of the hatred after 9/11. I remind folks, the countries that Trump put in the Muslim ban, by the way, were Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, Syria, and Yemen, right? Those are the countries subject to Trump's Muslim ban. And he called it for national security to make sure 9/11 doesn't happen again. The countries responsible for 9/11 were UAE, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, which, by the way, two of those countries are countries with Trump's businesses in them. That racist Muslim ban had nothing to do with 9/11 or national security. It had everything to do with bigotry and racism. And these are all connected. The unity that existed was if you unquestionably supported what George W. Bush called a crusade that God told him to wage. He said, God told me to end tyranny in Iraq. That's wild. That's horrific. You apply that phrase to any other person in the world and you would say, well, that's a terrorist right there. If Osama bin Laden said, God told me to end tyranny in America and that's why I did what I did, we would condemn that as terrorism. Why are we justifying our president saying God told him to wage a crusade against Iraq? It's incredible. It's contrary to human decency to let theocracy decide who lives and who dies. So if you were unquestionably supporting George Bush, then yeah, there was unity. Otherwise, you're unpatriotic. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists, he famously said. Whitewashing objections to killing hundreds of thousands of Afghan and Iraqi civilians and thousands of US soldiers in these needless and barbaric wars. The unity that we actually need is unity built on justice, as our Constitution requires, on ensuring that we do not scapegoat innocent people, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, believer, non-believer. The unity that we need is to uphold due process for all people, especially when it's hard. Because if we can't do it when it's hard, if we can't uphold justice when it's hard, then it was never justice we upheld in the first place. And that's the third lesson I want to talk about. the perspectives on the future. This revisionist history of unity, it undermines the lived experiences of people of color, of Muslims. So let's reflect on these past errors and ensure a future nation built on actual justice. The reality is that even now, anti-Muslim, anti-Black, anti-Arab, anti-Jewish hate crimes are still at record highs. Donald Trump has promised an even more aggressive anti-Muslim ban if he's reelected. And this is unsurprising that Trump promises more Islamophobic bigotry, given that Islamophobia remains an acceptable, even celebrated form of bigotry in American politics today. Representative Randy Fine of Florida tweeted out a picture of, I think, like bacon on a burger or something, and said, quote, "Getting some protection against Muslim terror before my meetings at Pigwitch, which has been featured on the diners and drive-ins and dives," end quote. And as I've recently written, even the Department of Justice tragically demonstrates a double standard in how they respond to the murder and kidnapping of American citizens, loudly and correctly condemning and prosecuting crimes committed by Hamas, but wholly ignoring those crimes against American citizens committed by Netanyahu. That's a problem. The future also requires that we do right by those who continue to suffer from 9/11 in the United States. How many people realize that more FDNY members have, Fire Department New York members have died from World Trade Center illnesses since 9/11 than on 9/11? Our nation's lack of guaranteed universal health care as a human right is a perpetual atrocity inflicted upon our populace. So if we want to learn, ensure we learn from the lessons of history, our future must be grounded in absolute justice. That means rejecting double standards and legal accountability, rejecting discriminatory legislation against marginalized communities, rejecting anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia. Today, this week, we mourn the loss of lives over these last 23 years. The people lost, the opportunities lost, the rights lost. And the best way to honor what we lost is to ensure we truly uphold justice for the next 23 years and beyond, to truly demand justice for all. True love of humanity requires it. And that's kind of the point, that love isn't a word, it's meaningful action for justice. And that is something that we must never forget. Whew. All right. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest. When we come back from break, we are going to welcome a stellar leader in that fight for democracy, somebody working hard to uphold democracy, Gina Ortiz-Jones, the Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones, military veteran, former candidate for U.S. Congress, and now working valiantly, courageously in Texas to protect abortion and reproductive rights. And I think, as she'll talk about, what happens in Texas is not just a Texas issue, it's a national issue because of the outsized impact Texas has across the country. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. And if you're listening on Substack, be sure to hit that subscribe button so we can continue this advocacy for human rights and media accountability. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Gina Ortiz-Jones, a first-time guest to the show. The Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones served as the 27th Undersecretary of the Air Force, the second highest civilian in the Department of the Air Force, appointed by President Biden and unanimously confirmed in the Senate, which I don't know how it was possible in this Senate to have a unanimous confirmation, but Gina proved it, and she's brilliant. Has an illustrious history, including running for Congress twice. I can empathize with that pain, having done that myself as well. And now, if you're seeing these brilliant viral ads out of Texas from Find Out PAC, she's the mastermind behind that. We'll talk about Find Out PAC and the importance of protecting reproductive rights in Texas as well. Gina, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Qasim, for having me on. Appreciate it.
There's a lot to cover. We're recording this not long after the debate that we saw between Harris and Trump. Interestingly, it's the first time they ever met in real life as well. You would have thought they would have crossed paths at some point, right? But apparently that was the first time they met. And really, from the get-go, I liked how she kind of leaned into him, didn't let him kind of run away, didn't feel intimidated by him. and attacked him. And from a body language perspective, you probably noticed this. She stared him down constantly while talking to him. Didn't let him, run, didn't look timid at all. She was very authoritative. And I think I saw a fact check that Trump never mentioned her name even once. He mentioned Biden repeatedly. Apparently, he still thinks he's running against Biden, but he never mentioned her name. And he never looked at her. He kind of looked at the crowd. He looked, or not the crowd, but the moderators and the camera. I have a lot of thoughts about the debate. Would love to get your high-level thoughts to kick it off.
Vice president's a serious candidate. The vice president is a serious candidate. Donald Trump is not, right? And I think that just came out in spades yesterday. And I mean, the fact that she laid out her plans, what she would do to serve the American people, what she would do as the commander in chief, understanding the solemn responsibility that is to lead our men and women in uniform, but also the importance of that role for the free world, right? And I think unfortunately, Donald Trump just couldn't get past his own grievances and frankly, trafficking and conspiracy theories. There was really nothing in there for anybody that cared about the future of the country. And so I respect people's opinions, but to me, I just do not understand how it is anywhere close. And certainly, I know we'll get into this, but on the issue of reproductive rights, I mean, Texas, we're on the front line of this issue, and for him to just be so dismissive and serves, I'm just pushing it to the states. But we've got tons of horrible stories about what that has looked like in Texas, and I know we'll dig into that. But I mean, he's not a serious candidate. And those of us that care about the future of the country, you and I, having worked in the spaces in the fields that we have, know just how important this election it is, and how truly democracy is on the line in just 50 some odd days.
Well, let's dive into the reproductive and abortion conversation now. I'm so glad you brought that up, Gina. Texas is on the front lines, and I think there are a lot of lies he put forth on there. None bigger, in my view, than his claim that America was divided, they didn't know what to do, and he came in, he saved America by getting rid of Roe, when in fact the opposite was true. You had well over 70% of Americans who wanted Roe to be law of the land, who respected that aspect of it. And you run for office, I run for office. You talk to even staunch conservatives who are like, look, I don't like abortion. I would never get an abortion, but I also don't want to tell people what to do with their lives. They respect the ability to have individual autonomy, even if that's not a decision they would make. And that's the right answer, right? No one is forcing you to change your moral standard. We're just saying, don't force your moral standard on other people as well. And it's no accident. I think Texas is one of the states that leads the way, that 16 of the 17 states with the highest maternal and infant mortality rates are red states that deny reproductive health access. Now, what do you think about this, though? This part really was interesting to me. He rebuked J.D. Vance and then asked twice about whether he would sign a national abortion ban. He punted. He refused to answer.
Well, yeah, and I think that's your answer, right? I mean, that's a pretty straightforward yes or no question. And the fact that he can't answer it, I mean, it just can't be trusted on this issue. I think, look, the best predictor of someone's future behavior is what they have done.
Yeah.
And his appointment to the Supreme Court of those three that have dismantled Roe and have left us in the position that we're in now has shown very clearly where he is on this issue, even if he is not going to answer a yes or no question. I think, this is, it's interesting. A lot of folks, kind of ask me why I'm focused on this issue now, given my background has traditionally been in national security. And you and I both know, right? I mean, we can't truly have national security or economic security if 50% of the population can't make decisions about their own bodies and make the very simple decisions about being able to listen to their doctor and get the care that they need. And so I think there's just, if we as a country are to move forward, and frankly, if we as a country are also supposed to lead on civil rights and on human rights, it's just too easy for those that we may be working with, other countries we may be working with, to kind of look over our shoulder and say, oh, okay, but like, what about those women bleeding out in emergency room bathrooms because they're being denied care, right? I mean, so this is also an issue of American leadership and credibility on that when such awful things are happening and they don't have to be, right?
And you alluded to this, and to build on this really important point that I think Representative Kamala Harris has brought up a few times, but it should be addressed more from a national security perspective. If half your fighting force can't get the healthcare they need, there goes your national security. I mean, remove reproductive healthcare, apply it to any other thing, appendicitis, gallbladder. I mean, you name it, right? If a person
Yes.
can't get the healthcare, how are they supposed to provide defense and security? And so this is actually not just an immoral and politically dumb move. It's also from a national security standpoint a dumb move. And I think Trump realizes that, but he doesn't know how to back out of it without pissing off the evangelicals who are just militant about this as well.
Well, and I think I mean, you and I know we also cannot separate our economic security from our national security,
Right.
right? I'm from Texas. 1 in 10 kids in this country calls Texas home, right? So what happens
Yeah.
here really has an outsized effect on the direction of the country. We are a state that has not expanded Medicaid, right?
Wow.
And my San Antonio is my hometown, the seventh largest city in the country. We are known as Military City USA, but we are also known as one of the top 10 largest cities with such a high rate of inequities, right?
Yeah.
And again, so when I think, so it's not their attacks on reproductive rights. Look, I take them at their word when they say their Project 2025 and all that they've laid out, right? So to me, as what they have done now has shown going after IVF, going after birth control, those things are not out of the realm of possible. And when I think about the economic inequities existing today, for anybody to think that, attacking birth control or taking that away from women would not have significant impacts on our economy, just don't know what they're talking about. So people
Right.
are failing to make these very basic connections about what this is ultimately about. Yes, it's about control, but if you don't want to have that argument, you can just very look at like, okay, well, if people can't make decisions about when or if they're going to have kids, that has significant impacts on our labor market, right?
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with the Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones, who served as the 27th Undersecretary of the Air Force, former candidate for Congress, Executive Director of Find Pac. And one of the pretty aggressive attacks Trump made, in fact, I think probably the defining attack he made were on immigrants. And it remains to be seen whether he thinks that political asylum is the same thing as a mental asylum. I don't think he understands there's a difference between the two, which is hilarious and horrifying at the same time.
Those terms are coming after somebody briefs them on what a tariff is, right? Or actually what a
Exactly.
Marxist is. Like, lots of
Yeah.
definitions that need to be reviewed with them.
Words just don't have meanings anymore. They just kind of throw it out there with this fear mongering stuff. And you get into conversations with these MAGAs and you ask them, okay, what is a Marx? Explain to me a Marxist in simple terms. And they can't. And it's just like QAnon nonsense. And that's how you get to a candidate for president claiming that Haitian immigrants are coming to Ohio to steal dogs and cats and eat them. And it's just like, where do you begin? There's that scene in The Hangover where he says to Galifianakis, "You are literally too stupid to insult," and he says, "Thank you." Like that's kind of what I feel like at this moment talking.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it's like, where do you even begin with that? I
Well,
mean,
that's
the
right.
data,
That's a good
that's,
one.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the data, there's no invasion. Undocumented crossings are at a 3-year low. Murder rates are at historic lows. Immigrants, even undocumented immigrants, have much lower crime rates than born U.S. citizens. On the contrary, we see incredible amounts of sexual abuse by Border Patrol against undocumented immigrants and immigrants in general, and American citizens as well. And the list goes on and on. Do you think his play is, if I fearmonger with this racist nonsense enough, I'll activate enough of a racist base? Like, what is the strategy at this point?
I don't, it's unfortunate because again, I think, as we started, he's not really interested in appealing to people's ambitions and their desires and their wants for, for their families and for their country. And he just kind of really goes back to where it seems like he's comfortable, which is peddling in these, in his personal grievances and these prejudices. It's just it's like, so many of us, I'm sure like you, are just like exasperated with it. We're done with it. Like let's turn the page, right? It's just because it's just so there are other things that we actually need to be talking about that matter, right? And in this day and age, if those are the things that are going to, excuse your vote for a felon, for somebody who tried to overthrow the government, well then, it is what it is. But like there are others that are frankly interested in the economic security of our country and moving forward. And those are the folks that we need to reach and help explain what the VP wants to do. Should she be elected? Because there's a lot of good that can be done. I mean, but also the choices could not be more stark.
So speaking of security, let's talk about Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Israel-Palestine. The claim that Biden botched the Afghanistan withdrawal, obviously, that was a protocol set forth by Trump before he left office. Obviously, Trump refused to explain why he negotiated a deal with the Taliban, why he bypassed the Afghan government, why he released or forced the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners. What did you think of Kamala Harris's answer to that question?
Well, I think she, rightly fact checked him and helped people understand the critical mistake that the President Trump did by negotiating with the Taliban, right, and cutting out the Afghanistan government at the time, which of course is going to, weaken any way forward there. I think what I would have wished also would have been part of that conversation though last night would have been being very clear about the significant challenge, the ways in which rather the People's Republic of China challenges our security, our interests, and our values, right? We have to be playing the long game. We have to be investing in the types of things that are truly going to secure our economic security, national security. And so, certainly the ways in which she highlighted why that was a mistake and frankly a lack of understanding about how praising these dictators and these authoritarians actually weaken our standing with the exact allies that we need to be working with, right? So I mean, all of it to say she gets it, he does not. I mean, he has also shown the ways in which he would use that political office for political and for personal gain. So it's just, we need a commander in chief that understands the service and sacrifice of those serving, but also understands the unique role American leadership plays in global security.
Yeah, and his calling on Viktor Orban, it's like when the assumption is you want to be a dictator, Viktor Orban is not the guy you want to cite.
Right. That's right. That is not a flex. That is not
No,
a
but to
flex.
him,
Exactly.
but to him it is,
That's
right? To
right.
him it is a
That's
flex.
right.
He's thinking it's a big deal, which shows just how detached he is from reality. But I think it also goes back to the belief that so many folks on the right don't actually believe in democracy anymore. They just want, authoritarianism and power. A friend.
And I thought she was so skilled, understanding a communicator always understands their audience, right? So they're there in Pennsylvania and she's talking about Ukraine. And then she very, I think, adeptly like pivots to what the implications would be for another country that would be concerned about what happens on their border, which is Poland, and what that means for Polish Americans, right? Similarly, as a member of the Filipino American community, when we think about what's happening in the Indo-Pacific, right, 4 million Philams here in the US, we are thinking obviously about the economic and national and the security ties related there. So I thought that was just such a really smart move, but also help people understand like these things are related. Just because it's happening to one group does not mean it could ultimately not happen to you as well.
There was plenty of anti-trans bigotry as well, particularly that public funding for transgender surgeries or gender-affirming care for immigrants, criminal immigrants, who, by the way, are eating dogs and cats. And I do give credit to the moderators this time for doing a better job in that CNN interview with Biden. I mean, Biden was a debacle in that interview. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to defend his performance. But the fact that the CNN interviewers refused to fact check anything was just beyond the pale. It was a journalistic malpractice to me. Here, I think I read that 91% of Trump's lies still were not fact checked. And I think you kind of can't, because then all you're doing is fact checking. But they did fact check a number of them. And on this one about the eating of the dogs, they pointed out, they called the city manager and he said that, well, there's absolutely zero evidence of it. And Trump goes, well, no, I saw it on TV, which to me speaks to either his gullibility or his incompetence or a combination of the two. But I would have loved for them to just ask him repeatedly, where's your evidence? Just provide your evidence, just to make clear that he has none, and let his incompetence kind of be on display itself.
Yeah, I mean, I similarly, right? I thought they did a wonderful job on the main things that people really needed to understand what happened, right? One, you didn't win the election, right? Babies are not being killed after they're born, like, and as the point that you just made, I thought they did a really good job, and that was important for folks that if they hadn't been tuning in to the election until now, got a good snapshot of the difference between the two, but also what is fact and what is not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think there's implications of that kind of hate as well, because we see when presidents engage in this kind of rhetoric, it results in real life hate crimes. There was a study done by ABC actually a couple of years ago that documented hate crimes, violent responses to Trump's comments, and compared it to Obama, Bush, and Clinton, and found that, Trump had like 56 examples of people who committed violent hate crimes in response to his rhetoric. And the last three presidents combined, or maybe it was the four presidents combined, had zero.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's what about this right now.
And that's so dangerous, certainly in a state like my own, right, where we have ready
Yeah.
access to, unfortunately, weapons of war. I mean, to your point, I remember distinctly being in the Walmart parking lot, going there after the shooting in El Paso, right? I remember hosting our Stop Asian Hate vigil here in San Antonio in front of the San Fernando Cathedral after the shootings in Atlanta at the spa there, the Asian American women, the Korean American women, if I remember correctly. And I remember also hosting the vigil here in San Antonio based on the shooting in New Zealand, right? Again, a lot of that based on, unfortunately, a lot of just hateful rhetoric. I mean, look, when the leader of the free world, the American president, speaks and takes actions, those resonate in other places, and they travel much further. They have a different impact than other national leaders. And so we, again, need somebody that is serious and understands that. And I think that's clearly the VP.
And I give Kamala Harris a lot of credit for having a strong debate. On one area that I was very disappointed, I wanted to get your thoughts, is her continued alignment with Biden on Israel and Palestine. It doesn't make sense to me. All the data and polling shows that Americans not only want a ceasefire, they want to end arms to Israel. 61% in a national, I think, YouGov poll, CBS YouGov poll found 61% of all Americans want to end arms to Netanyahu. 63% of independents and moderates, 77% of Democrats want to end arms to Netanyahu. And I love the way the moderators framed the question. And they didn't just say, what are you going to do? They said, given that President Biden has been unsuccessful in securing a hostage release and ceasefire, given that Netanyahu has been clear he's not going to agree to a deal, what are you going to do to bring him to the table and make sure a deal happens? And I was disappointed in her answer. She said, well, we're working hard around the clock, but she's not going to stop any arms. She's not going to stop any offensive arms, certainly. And I think this is hurting her immensely, especially if you talk to young people, if you talk to people of color, people from the Muslim, the Black, the Arab communities. This is a key issue to them. And I'm not saying that they're going to suddenly vote for Trump, but they don't need to. They just need to not vote for her for it to hurt her badly. And given how close the polling is, I think that's a huge error that she continues to stand with Biden when Biden is right of Reagan on this issue. What are your thoughts?
I think, I mean, certainly as we continue to read about the senseless loss of life, right? You're right. It calls for greater action than what we are currently seeing. I think you and I also know, though, there's a lot of things that are probably happening behind the scenes that is not going to be discussed in public, that is critical to moving in the direction that we wanted to. So like not having access to that information, it'd be hard for me to, critique exactly what she is or is not doing, because so much of that is not going to be privy to the public as they continue to negotiate.
On Ukraine, this is like classic Trumpism, right? Like, I'll end the war right before I'm even inaugurated. And I think Harris had a good retort that says, yeah, you'll end it by giving up on Ukraine and letting Russia take over and the war will be over. I mean, you've worked in this space closely, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as a professional in this space. Kind of, how do you grade Biden's handling of Ukraine, and what do you foresee if you were to game this out? Trump's claims of World War III starting if Harris is reelected. It's probably fear-mongering, but at the same time, Putin is crazy. And a recent report came out that he was close to using nuclear weapons last year.
I think on the Ukraine issue, I think the VP rightly sees this in a larger context, right? It's not just about Ukraine. It's about Putin's greater ambitions and really his own personal grievances about the ways in which the USSR has fallen and what that has meant to him and his understanding of Russia's role in the world. I frankly, I remember shortly after the invasion, we started having the Department of the Air Force leadership started having weekly briefings on how things were going. Because if you remember, there were obviously kind of lots of assessments that was going to be over very quickly. And so I don't think we can ever underestimate, right? We never should,
Yeah.
because this is, I think, also part and parcel of the importance of American leadership, is the willingness to fight for democracy, the willingness to fight for freedom, which continues to fuel the Ukrainian soldiers, and frankly, their civilians that are also stepping up and ensuring they can fight, right? Those folks are just fighting for at any day. And it's amazing to think how long they've gone, how much progress they have made, to be honest, truly. I mean, it is, and but again, those folks like know exactly what's at stake, right? And so I when I think about that, I always think about, wow, shortly after that, folks did not think this was going to last very long.
Yeah.
But to remember, I think part of that also, not only were they fighting for themselves though, but I think part of that motivation is always like, the US has got my back. They
Yeah.
said they've got my back, and like, right. And so I think that really, folks, I get it. Less than 1% of the US will serve in uniform. And granted, there are others that serve in significant ways in the intelligence community and other as civil servants, et cetera. But few people understand and have access to those types of experiences where you get to see firsthand the importance of American leadership and the importance of American allyship, right? And I think it's really important. Again, like I keep coming back to the same point because it's just such a fundamental point to us, our country moving forward, but also the direction of the protection of democracy and how we actually then continue to like align ourselves with those that are going to protect it, right? And that's only done based on how well we are demonstrating those values both here at home and abroad. Do I think a World War III would start if she's the vice president? No, I think that was probably, that's I don't look again. There's somebody who doesn't understand how tariffs work, somebody who doesn't understand kind of basic things about like the world and the economy. I just don't put a lot of stock in like anything they say, right? However, I do put stock in Project 2025, and I do put stock in the people that he would surround himself with, that are frankly going to be motivated by nothing more than revenge and retribution, and try to put in policies in place that move us to some type of like extreme Christian nationalist ideology, and that we just have, look, there's no appetite for that, and certainly our country deserves better.
And very well said, Gina. And I want to double down on a point you made about America having its back. I mean, folks need to remember that in the 1990s, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons to the United States on the promise that the US would have their back. And so if we believe in a nuclear disarmament strategy, we have to follow through on the commitments we make. Otherwise, why should any country want to disarm? Why should they want to reduce arms? In fact, they should be aggressively trying to seek arms to defend themselves should the need arise. So
that's right.
Strategy.
And people forget, right? People forget that the Helsinki summit, right? I remember distinctly when he was standing up there with Putin, and frankly, sided with Putin over his own U.S. intelligence community at the time.
Sure.
I mean, that person can't be trusted, right? And certainly to not understand even just COVID, right? I mean, the handling of that of course became a national security issue. So there's just, for me, it's very clear, right?
No, it is pretty clear, and I think the majority of folks get it. We just got to get the vote out, and that's where I want to shift to this final stage of our conversation, the last 6-7 minutes that we have. And if you're just tuning in, we're speaking to somebody I deeply admire, Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones, veteran, former candidate for Congress, and now the executive director of Find Out PAC. And I can't remember where I was when I saw your first ad, but I kind of stopped, just watched it, and I thought it was brilliant. Talk about what is Find Out PAC, what was the genesis behind it, and what's the goal this November?
Yeah. So real quick, the goal this November is to unseat 3 Republican Texas Supreme Court justices. Qasim, not one elected official in Texas has been held accountable for these egregious abortion bans that has led to the needless suffering of women all across our state. For me, this started late last year, December, when I read the opinion by the Texas Supreme Court, where they denied Kate Cox, the pregnant mother of 2, a medical abortion that her doctor said was needed to save her life and fertility. And I'll be honest, I wasn't super surprised by the decision, but I did take the time to read this. It's only 7 pages, but it's 7 pages of gaslighting. Essentially what they said is, we think we know more than your doctor, and you do not qualify for the only exception in our state. So to me, that is very egregious. I grew up on the far west side of San Antonio. Fuck around, find out is not an uncommon phrase. That is how find out Pat came to be. These folks are elected. It's a 9-court bench. They're all Republican, 9-court bench, they're elected. They can be unelected. And I'll be honest, motivated also by what we saw in Kansas, Kentucky, and Ohio with those ballot initiatives. And our circumstances are worse. Just to put that bench in context, if I may, the Texas Supreme Court, in Texas, we have had a 6-week abortion ban, no exceptions for rape or incest for almost a year before Roe fell, right? So the only difference now with the Dobbs decision is the 6 weeks goes away. So the only thing we have in our state is the medical exception. And this Texas Supreme Court, with that opinion, essentially showed that is real on paper, but not in real life. And as importantly, they have shown other extremist state Supreme Courts also how to make that moot, right?
Yeah.
Also how to make that moot. And I'm even just to nerd out with your listeners, because I'm guessing it's a bunch of nerds like me.
Yes.
What they essentially said is, we don't think your doctor used the right standard. We think there's 2 standards. One, there's the reasonable standard, which there's the good faith standard, which is, hey, you're an expert, you've got the training, you know the circumstances, we trust you to make good decisions about what this patient needs. That's the good faith estimate. The other one, though, is the reasonable, like a reasonable assessment, which is, would another doctor have come to like the same reasonable assessment as you? Now, you and I both know, like, you can always find somebody that's going to cherry pick something and say, hey, that's not what I would have done. And then all of a sudden, these doctors face, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, prison time, they lose their license. So they're scared into not providing care. And that's what you hear in these stories time and time again, right? That like their doctors are saying this, they need this care, or sometimes their doctors are not even wanting to confront the situation. I mean, some stories of again, women suffering because the hospital won't admit them because they are fearful of what they may need to do. All that to say, these folks are elected, they can be unelected. I think what's also important, Qasim, is we have never tried for these seats. We've never tried to flip these seats. And I think as more folks are realizing, though, that the last arbiter in states on this issue is going to be the Texas Supreme Court, then people understand that the importance of this. We just polled, and our pollster is Angie Keffler with Global Strategy Group. And that's important. That name is important because she did the polling in in Kansas, Kentucky, and Ohio, all of those successful ballot initiatives. She's also doing it this cycle in Arizona, Florida, and Montana. So when folks want to poll and do a ballot initiative on this issue, she's the one they go to. So that's why I knew we had to have the best of the best. I get it, Texas, people kind of like, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of heartburn over kind of previous heartbreaks, and I get it. But the data is very clear. These races start down, which is not surprising because it follows the kind of the partisan split, but also, again, people don't know who these people are. Once we informed voters, though, of what this bench has done and the resulting suffering of women, these, Qasim, become 1 to 2 point races. 1 to 2 point races. These are statewide races. And for this to be that close, shows the salience of this issue. And again, they move very quickly. We're not presenting them with 8 pages of facts. We're just saying, this is the bench, this is what they did, this is the suffering. To your point earlier about kind of where people are on this issue, 90% of the people that we polled support abortion to save the life of the mother, to include 84% of folks who said they will vote for Donald Trump in 2024. So this is not an issue on which people are divided. They have very strong feelings on abortion to save the life of the mother. So again, these are statewide races. We don't have a lot of these opportunities. And I always appreciate your smart analysis. So I'm going to share just a couple of other things in terms of why our effort is so important.
Before you do that, we're down to our last 2 minutes. I wanted to make sure this is the kind of stuff that I love. And folks know I bring folks on here who are, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. How can folks contribute to Find Out PAC? How can they support you? Because look, guys, it's a very simple equation. We suffer under an electoral college, and I call it suffer because it is a white supremacist ideology. It was designed not to elect a president based on what people want, but to ensure that enslavers could count the votes of their enslaved without actually giving them freedom or any kind of human dignity. And it's perpetuated till this day. But all that said, if we can win Texas, it's game over for Republicans. It's done. There's no path for them to win at that point. And so the work that Gina is doing is literally saving the fabric of democracy. And so I highly encourage you all to hear her out on how to support her work and her advocacy, because if we can make a miracle happen in these next 54 days or whatever it is, 50 days, it can be seismic for the future of our country. So how can folks support you? Where can they find you? How can they contribute?
Yep. The website is findoutpac.com. Go there, sign up for updates, make a contribution. Texas is where Wisconsin was about 15 years ago, right? Where they started the efforts to flip their Supreme Court. And now look at them, they're a functioning democracy, right? And again, it matters what happens in our state because our state Supreme Court writes the playbook for other extremist states.
Right. Exactly.
You're just seeing some of these bans in other states. We've had that for so long. So as we just said here, right? Like even flipping one of these seats is seismic. It resets expectations on what is possible in our state, but frankly, also the country. So really appreciate folks. And we just have to fight differently in Texas. Let me just say this, right? Folks are looking at these other ballot initiatives, and I get it. But in Texas, the reason we can't have we are not having a ballot initiative is because that process is controlled by the state legislature. So you can't look for the traditional markers in Texas because they don't exist. So when I tell you we've got data that says these are 1 to 2 point races, like focus on keep the main thing the main thing. Can we win? Yes, but we have to invest. So I really appreciate your listeners going to findoutpac.com and making a contribution so we can get our ad all across Texas and help people understand who they need to vote for this November in the Texas Supreme Court races.
Brilliant. And you'll find me pushing out their content as well. Gina, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. What an honor. Thanks so much.
That is Gina Ortiz-Jones, serves the 27th Undersecretary of the Air Force, second highest civilian in the Department of the Air Force, appointed by President Biden, unanimously confirmed by the Senate, the first woman of color and first out lesbian to serve as the Undersecretary of any military department. A brilliant thought leader, has run for Congress. I feel her pain there, and is now Executive Director of Find Out PAC. And this is the kind of leadership that we need in this country. So I encourage you to go to her website, support her work, and let's do the business, the hard work of protecting our democracy. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. That was Gina Ortiz-Jones, a brilliant thought leader, and she walks a walk, and I'm deeply impressed with her courage, her conviction, and her work ethic. And I'm going to be supporting her. You're going to see more of her content coming through my platforms because, one, I believe that we need to elevate people who are doing the hard work because it can be really lonely up there. And two, the work she's doing is literally the work of saving our democracy. And so if I can contribute to that, I am all in. So keep an eye out for that. I want to close by just doing a quick recap of the debate and a couple of issues that Gina and I weren't able to get across. I absolutely appreciated Kamala Harris's focus on the economy. For some bizarre reason, people think that Trump is better on the economy than Biden and Harris. And I've been super critical of Biden and Harris on the economy. And I don't want that criticism to mean that I think Trump is better. He's not. He's far, far worse. My critique of Biden and Harris is to demand them and to encourage them to do better, not to claim that Trump is somehow a better alternative. He's not. He's abysmal. He's terrible. He's horrible. Harris's policy proposals, which include passing a $6,000 child tax credit, is brilliant. That has proven to alleviate childhood poverty by more than 30%. And it will be seismic, especially for new parents. And this is the part that really pisses me off about Republicans, where they talk about, well, people aren't having kids anymore. Well, give them an opportunity to afford kids. You can't say that you're not having kids and then turn a blind eye to the fact that you can't afford to have a child anymore. The lack of universal health care, right now, to have a child without health care costs $33,000. Who has $33,000 lying around to have a kid? And so this $6,000 tax credit for expenses is critical. It's massively critical. And while I'm disappointed that Harris is moving away from universal health care, I'm deeply disappointed in that. I do appreciate that she at least wants to expand the ACA, whereas Trump wants to just get rid of it. You know, comically in the debate, he said, well, I have a concept of a proposal. My dude, you've had a decade to come up with a healthcare plan and you have a concept of a proposal, you're like the kid in the group project who didn't do his end of it, and he's trying to fish for words while standing up in front of stage. That's exactly what he sounded like last night. Harris also has a proposal for a $25,000 credit for first-time home buyers. Again, huge, incredible. I mean, that's fantastic. And she's also planning on building 3 million more homes. And I will say, I think we need closer to about 10 million more homes. Congressman Joaquin Castro has a brilliant proposal that I think she should take into account consideration. Hopefully she will if she's elected. But $25,000 for first-time home buyers and a 3 million new homes is absolutely an excellent first step. She's focused heavily on lowering the cost of prescription drugs, has already done so for dozens of prescription drugs, and lowering the cost of insulin for people on Medicare. That needs to be nationwide. I think insulin should be free. It should be as free as oxygen. And it's absurd that insurance companies will produce insulin for $70 for a year's supply and sell it for $12,000. Not an exaggeration. That's exactly what's happening right now. But I appreciate that she focused heavily on the economy, because at the end of the day, you've heard me say this before, there is no justice without economic justice. Everything else revolves around economic justice. Make sure people have enough money for food, water, shelter, healthcare, education, clothing, and a lot of other problems can be resolved much quicker, but we need to have basic economic justice. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. Make sure if you're listening on Substack, you hit that subscribe button so we can continue this advocacy, continue this accountability for legacy media, and to hold our politicians accountable. Be sure to follow me on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. You have my promise to continue to advance a show that builds on compassion, justice, and accountability for those in power. Have a great show lined up for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place, at 10 a.m. on Sunday on Sirius XM Review Channel 126. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.